Hi, everyone. An interesting thing happened recently. I went pretty much cold turkey on social media, specifically Twitter, for various reasons. One of which is just I wasn't happy. It was making me unhappy, and then I just noticed how unhappy most people were on it. I had given a couple of test runs to see if I could, go a couple days without it, and I was able to do that. And finally, for a couple of reasons, I decided to quit, and I've stayed off of it for a week. And why do you care? Well, because some amazing things happened. I'm in a better mood. I'm doing more things. I have more free time, and I'm watching more movies. Uh, like most people, I've got a queue on. I've got Netflix and Amazon Prime, and since I used to be kind of overly busy and then wasting time on social media, I didn't really finish anything ever. It would take me sometimes a week to finish a movie, and I couldn't really follow any series. But now that I've got all this free time, I've been catching up on a lot of stuff, and that comes to the subject of this video. I saw basically the best Punisher movie never made. By that I mean that it is not a Punisher movie. But it is in the heart of it, and it's probably better than any Punisher movie could have been made. So, as most people know, there have been movies about comic book characters since the 1930s, but it really started to ramp up around the late 90s. You had Blade in, I think, 98 or 99, Spider-Man 2000, 2001. I remember X-Men was 2000, and it's basically been off to the races for 18 years. So pretty much most of the main superheroes have been done. Sometimes have been done several times. We've already seen Spider-Man rebooted 3 times. We've seen Punisher 4 times, yeah, including movies and television since the late 80s. An interesting thing is that when you see so many different takes, and all of the Punishers were quite different takes. You had Dolph Lundgren, which is almost, weirdly enough, it was actually probably the closest one to this movie You Were Never Really Here. Because that was back in the way when comic book movies were embarrassed to be comic book movies. They would try to hide it. I've talked before about when the Michael Keaton Batman movie was coming out. He did tons of press, and you couldn't get him to talk about Batman. He was so embarrassed he was in a Batman movie. It was such a career killer to be in. And then we had, gosh, I don't know, 25 years later, something like that, they had the Punisher with Tom Jane, which I like a lot, which is fairly controversial. Then there had the Punisher Warzone, which I didn't like, and most people tend to memory hole it. And then you had Punisher introduced as Daredevil season 2 Daredevil season 2 on Netflix, and then he had his own series, which I never finished. But one of the things that I always try to talk about, because I've got a channel where I talk about comics, is that it's not the costume that people like. People don't like Captain America because of the Captain America costume. It's one of the aspects. What you like is Steve Rogers, and specifically you like the aspects of his story and his personality that make up Steve Rogers, because he is very compelling. This little weak little wimp. Have they ever said what malady he had? He just has sickness. Like, what did he have? Did he have leukemia? Or like, what did he have? What was wrong with him? But one of the essence of Punisher is obviously, revenge. Revenge is a common desire for humans. Someone does something wrong to you, you enact vengeance. Basically, they get a debt. It's almost kind of like a court. Somebody did something, they cost you money, so they have to pay it back. Now, obviously, a lot of these revolve around things that are being illegal, that you can't do. So it becomes a power fantasy, as well as the classic primal revenge fantasy. But the thing about the revenge fantasy is that for most people to like it, for it to have some kind of meaning and worth, the aggrieved should be presented to be either good or better than the people who he's getting vengeance upon. So there's been an entire series based on this. But there's another aspect in that. Obviously, there is a cost to it. It's not just the catharsis of getting revenge. It's that once you get that revenge, it's going to wear off, and you're still going to be that person who lost that thing. Whatever you take from the people who hurt you is not going to equal what you lost. So that's another thing that gives a depth and meaning to revenge stories. If if you whatever, your wife gets killed, your kids get killed, and then you kill all the bad guys and your life is super awesome. Well, that's half of the canon movies from the 80s, but they don't really last. They're not really meaningful. You have to have that loss. At the end of every Punisher story, is the one shots or an arc over several issues in the comics, he's still lost. He's still in a deficit. His life is still ruined. So you kind of understand how it's a cycle of constantly wanting to get paid back for something that you can never really get paid back for. So You Are Never Really Here has all the aspects, a lot of the key aspects of The Punisher. It has a very scary, intense protagonist from New York City who served in the military, specifically the Marines. Although I looked on Wikipedia and said he was in the FBI. I did not get that at all. You have him losing a family member. You have him getting revenge. You also have him saving someone along the way. That's one of the more humanizing aspects of the revenge genre, is that usually the hero, the protagonist, will not just get revenge for himself, but he will come across other people who have been aggrieved by the same parties, or he will come on like basically a side quest, and it will make it more than just simple revenge. So this story starts off, and it is very, very clearly an art film. But don't leave, because usually when people hear the word art film, at least for me, you just kind of really realize like, oh, it's going to be some pretentious, no, this is actually very visceral and very real. And the thing that I think I like the most about it is that it has a female writer and director. And I'm going to ascribe some basic traits to her based on being a woman. I haven't read any interviews with her, but I just came into it knowing that it was kind of like an artsy revenge flick that got really, really good reviews. Besides Joaquin Phoenix, who's playing the Joker in the movie coming out next year, I didn't really know anything about it. I just saw the poster, and if you look at the poster, you just kind of guess what the movie is. So I saw him with a hammer, so I go, oh, it's going to be something like Old Boy. It's going to be like a hallway scene, and you actually don't get that. In fact, you rarely see the violence, and when you do, it's pretty short and matter of fact. If you watch my other channel, I've mentioned that I'm a combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was in bigger platoon and company wide operations, and so a lot of the stuff I did see was kind of like the movies. You got planes screaming down and dropping bombs and RPGs flying through you, and but this one is it's not war, it's basically crime and it's revenge. So it's it's a guy with one gun, or he's got his fists, or he's got a blunt instrument. And so the things that you would usually see, you don't, at least not in the way you saw it. And this is going to be filled with spoilers, but it's definitely a recommend. There's a point where he goes to rescue a young girl in this house, and he knows how many people are there. So they don't show it in the typical, very super dramatic way. It's actually shown almost exclusively through security camera footage. It's not like found footage. They literally just show the screen. They show him walking by, and then they show the rescue. Now, one of the things that's so compelling about this is that it is almost dialogue free. I mean, a lot of it is just Joaquin Phoenix and the depths of his despair. And he's kind of a taciturn guy. He looks very grubby. He's overweight. He's dirty. He's unkempt. But there's something about him that you constantly get hints to his character. that are very endearing. You get to meet his mother, who's very old. Joaquin Phoenix is about, I don't know, 42, 43. His mom's seems like she's like 80. Um, but she's very old, she's very sick, but they have a close bond. These are the things that, in the typical revenge movie, you would establish this in the first 15 minutes and then he would die. But his mother actually lives through most of the movie. In fact, a lot of it is, in a classic movie situation, one thing goes wrong. He basically gets his or not even gets his assignments. He gets his money from this guy who works at a bodega. The guy's kid is smoking on the fire escape with some friends and accidentally sees where Joe lives. Through a complicated series of events, some bad people end up getting to the bodega and under threat of death. They talk. They find the house, and the mother is killed. So, but the biggest thing that really, really drew me in is all the parts that they cut out of every other revenge movie were basically this entire movie. Joe he's kind of fat, but he's formable. They show him in a couple, fisticuffs. He can think his way out of a situation, but he has a full range of human emotions, even though he's very, very depressed, even though he's suicidal. Although he's suicidal in almost kind of like a teenager way. His job is that he, well, if you see the trailer and if you read about it, they make it like his job is to rescue girls. I didn't exactly get that. I got the feeling he was a guy you hired to basically break people's bones. And just by coincidence, in the first scene, he's rescuing someone, and the main plot of the movie is him actually rescuing and re-rescuing a young girl. But by the way, I was just thinking, I don't watch a lot of movies repeatedly unless they're like dumb action movies with special effects. I think I am gonna rewatch this thing because there was just a lot there. It's one of the things when you do an old story in a new way is it almost kind of breaks immersion in one way. You keep stepping out and go, wow, this movie's so good. It's so much different than X, Y, and Z. But there was just a lot there. Like I said, he's has some combat trauma. He had an abusive father. But when he goes home, and I used to notice this when I was a little bit younger, a couple years ago. When I would go home, I would kind of regress emotionally. Not that I would be like a teenager flopping on the bed, but sometimes I would get a little bothered. And I go, why am I bothered? It's almost like all my teenager emotions came back. You actually see this. He kind of attempts self-harm, but it's also a way, and he's kind of testing his reflexes. At one point, his mother, she's getting older and she's infirm and she's having a problem in the bathroom and she's asking for help, but she's also embarrassed at the same time. So he's got this pen knife and he's outside talking to her, but he's dropping it to hit his foot and then pulling his foot away at the same time. So it's a really interesting scene because it shows two aspects of his character, and three. It shows he's actually a very loving son, but he's kind of, he's kind of like a teenager, like a little whiny. You can see he's suicidal or at least self-harming, but you can also see there's an aspect of himself that likes going to the edge and coming back. He likes testing his reflexes because his job revolves him to be, very tough, but also being very quick and adaptable. So I won't give away the plot points because I feel like this is more about feelings and emotions. There's a great scene where his mother is killed, and he takes out the people who killed him very quickly. But then he basically lies on he has several breakdowns because it's very emotional, all the things he's going through. So he basically has a breakdown on the kitchen floor, and he just kind of starts talking to one of the men who killed his mother. Now he's already shot him. The guy's dying. He actually gives him a pain reliever. And then he's just kind of talking to him because in a weird kind of way, they have something in common. They both had a very intense, it's the end, the person who ended the life, that's pretty intense. And he's asking, he's like, was she afraid? Was she awake? And he's like, no, she was asleep. And there's this weird kind of scene where he's lying down next to him, and he actually curls his fingers around the guy who killed his mother. Why did he do that? I don't know why he did it, and I don't think the character knows why he did it, and I'm not even sure the writer knows why he does it. But it was something very oddly human that you never ever see in a movie like this. You then actually get to see Joe bury his mother, or rather, get rid of the body. I'm not sure why he doesn't just call the cops and have her, but he basically puts on a suit, which might not be his suit. It might have been his father's, and things are bad at this point. Like, it's almost at the point where it's going to be the final showdown with him and the main bad guys. But the movie takes a good, I don't know, like 10 minutes to show him drive in a suit, dress in a suit, put his mom in plastic in the back seat, drive through wherever there are Queens, and he's going through all the emotions of the last person who cared about him in the world is dead, and then he takes his mother way out into the woods, and very slowly, it's almost kind of like this like Frankenstein scene. He walks, he ties rocks to her, and walks her out into the lake and lets her submerge, and then he basically again kind of he puts rocks in his own pocket, so he goes down with her, but then he remembers that that girl's still out there. She still needs him. He's probably the only person who can find her, so he goes and he ends up fighting her. And it's not the happiest of endings. Obviously he's got a lot of trouble with the police for everything he's done, but the girl who's rescued was horribly abused, and she needs help that he can't provide because he himself really needs help. At the end, it ends with a very graphic apparent suicide that turns into be a fantasy, a suicide fantasy of his, while the girl has stepped out to the restroom for a second, and then she comes back, and then that's basically the end. So one of the things I loved about it, like I said, it's a character I like the Punisher, except for it's not the Punisher, except for it hits so many parts of what makes the Punisher a powerful and compelling character, and yet it does something very brave in that it goes around it. It goes to all the things that would have ended up on the cutting room floor. It goes to all the things they wouldn't have even written to the script, because they're like, we can't have a scene, we can't have 10 minutes of Frank going to his wife's, gravestone, or, doing all that stuff, but they do it, and it's fantastic. I forget which film festival, apparently it got like a 7-minute ovation, and it's very understandable. Like, it's fantastic. So this might seem like a weird video for me to do. I usually do comic book stuff or comic book related. I did some Star Wars videos before Solo came out, but I think I'm gonna do no actual schedule for doing things like this. It was just sleep schedule a little off since I was sick this weekend, and I thought I'd share with you a very, very good movie. So go check it out. It's You Were Never Really Here. It's on Amazon Prime, and thanks for watching.